All right, now it's on. Okay, so we'll try those introductions again. I'm Jim Eastman, aka Vitruvius, and I do music type production stuff, and this is Michael Waldstein, who also does music type production stuff. Talking about today, production on while being, a cheap bastard, because we're cheap bastards. I'll be talking about DIY hardware and, stuff you can build at home, and then also be getting a little bit into communities that exist on the internet for trading loops, trading samples, getting some advice, cool little pictures of what you can do production-wise. And then Micah will be getting us into the wonderful world of Linux audio, all sorts of Linux audio applications that exist.
Which is truly a misnomer. There I go talking already. It's really free and open source audio because all the stuff that's going runs under OSX.
True that. Thank you very much. So that's the agenda, I guess, for the presentation. For the wonderful world of DIY hardware, before I can get anywhere, you got to know how to solder. So if you're going to be building your own analog synths or your own compressors or your own amplifiers at home, helps to be handy with a solder iron. So this wonderful website called MediaCollege.com has some cool little tutorials. They have a lot of audio tutorials, a lot of video tutorials, but they also have a very nice how to solder tutorial. I'm not going to give you a how to solder tutorial because whatever. But, go out there, go to Radio Shack, drop 20 bucks on a cheap, 15-watt solder iron, and go to town. Have fun, practice, get good at soldering, because when you want to build analog synths, you got to solder. While we're on the tutorials section, we'll go over to the audio tutorials page of the Media College website here. A lot of basics on just how to get started in audio in general. You want to do production but have no idea how audio works, have no idea how the technology works, this is really a great place to get started. And this isn't the only source of it. You can, take advantage of the wonderful Google-ness of the internet and search around for fun audio tutorials. But I like the Media College website. I think it's really well put together. Covers most of the basic topics. There's also a number of blogs out there that cover sort of the audio education side of things. One of my favorites being the Audio Mastermind blog. In this case, it's a particular post about a set of tutorials for mastering, EQing, everything you want to get into in production. If I'm throwing terms out that confuses people, let me know and I'll adjust as needed. I have a tendency to kind of get lost in the world of audio speak. So if a word like audio compression doesn't mean anything to you, let me know and I'll try to explain a little better. But until then, I'm just going to keep rolling until anybody has anything. Oh, and apparently we have tickets to give away. So if you ask cool, insightful, interesting, or even boring, dull, and out there questions, we'll give you some tickets to enter for raffle type stuff. So, Audio Mastermind, one of many excellent blogs on the subject of audio technology, music technology. These guys post regular tutorials for any number of subjects. I think there was one recently about how to mic a drum set, which is actually surprisingly complicated. And that takes me over to the next page. There is a recording wiki. It's wikirecording.org. It's pretty young still. It's been around for a few months now. But like any wiki, it's slowly growing a collection of tips, tricks, tutorials, all sorts of other fun stuff focused exclusively on the world of recording, and included in that also some production stuff. Just general guides about technology. Pretty much all over the place. You get I don't know how easy this is to read, but you get into there's a lot of microphone technique on this wiki I found. So if you really want to get into recording stuff for your production, this is a great place to go, in addition to any of a number of the other sites I've located for you. Tasty coffee upstairs. Anyways, so these are some great places to get started into the technology of music in general. There's some music theory tutorials as well that I don't have open at the moment, but it's really good to know this stuff before actually getting into production. I'm always amazed at how many producers there are out there who don't know what a chord is. And so I really think the audio basics, the music basics, everything in that world is really important before you actually get into audio production. Now the fun stuff. This is a class down at the at Georgia Tech, professor there is offering an elective on analog synthesizers. The cool part about this, all his lectures are posted video files online. So you can download them and learn about, you know, voltage-controlled oscillators and transconductance amplifiers and all the wonderful analog circuitry of all those old-school synthesizers that everyone loves now and sells for thousands of dollars on eBay. You know, the Moogs, the old-school Yamahas, things like that, you know. So this really gets into the wonderful world of analog synths. Gets into the theory, but this is one of those things where it really helps to have a bit of a background in electrical engineering. If you don't know what an operational amplifier is, you probably don't want to start here, because this is a high-level engineering class. I think it's great, but I have a background in EE, so I have the conceptual basis. If you have a background in EE, I really recommend this, though. It is an excellent way to learn about music synthesis. On a more basic level, there's a lot of other DIY projects that sort of exist already that just require the knowledge of soldering, as I mentioned before. There's this eMusic DIY archive from Andrews, and a lot of this stuff is stuff you can find by Googling for DIY music or DIY synth, things like that. But it gets into the basics of a lot of what you want to build without necessarily getting to the theory of it. Looks like a complicated circuit, but if you're just soldering it together, you really don't care about how the transistor works, do you? So, great way to get started there. There's this particular archive. There's edrum.free.fr, which is for all the synthesized drum heads in the room. Little drum kits, little you know, pulse to MIDI converter boxes, all sorts of fun stuff, you know, little things you can build to put up in a drum kit, you know, wire up a cymbal so that it'll act as a MIDI controller as well as an actual cymbal. A lot of cool little projects here. The detail on this particular page is a bit lacking, but there is some good stuff here. There's the wonderful world of synth DIY, and of course, what community would be complete without a mailing list. So there's the Synth DIY mailing list. And these guys, a little wacky at times, but you know, what mailing list isn't? But these are great guys to talk to if you really want to get into building your own synths, do your own hardware synthesis in general. I love hardware synthesis. I think it's great. Although most of the stuff I do is digital just because it's cheaper. If you're actually buying gear, digital synths are cheaper. If you're building gear, it's about the same, and analog synths are more fun, but that's just my opinion. There's, of course, also synthdiy.com, which is a pretty, not huge community, but growing community about building your own synths at home. Now, if you don't want to build your own stuff, there's a lot of other ways to get gear out there. There's the usual cheapy methods, eBay. Great place to get old used synth gear, old audio gear. Hang out in local communities. There's a lot of people who get into production for a while, get out of production, and then just offload all their gear. You can have somebody who was into production for a few years, maybe is moving, maybe is doing something else, and just getting rid of the entire rack of gear. You can get some good synths that way. I picked up some good gear that way. I like that way. It's a good way to go. Used gear. Especially the quality stuff, because it doesn't really break down a whole lot. So that's the wonderful world of DIY hardware. I don't think I have too much else on that. Any questions at this point? All right. Well, I have a few communities to talk about, you know. I have a few more minutes. Yeah. Well, I guess you can look at it this way. There are a number of companies that sell synth kits out there that you can build. In the analog world, a synth kit will probably run you a couple $1,000s, but you know, say a brand spanking new Alesis analog synthesizer is going to be no less than $4,000 or $5,000. So, I mean, depending on the scale, I'd say building your own is probably no more than 50% of the cost of buying it as is.
I actually have a couple of hardware-related comments.
Good call.
Okay, cool. There's ridiculous cool things you can do with a pretty chip, and audio. For instance, if you want to build your own like 1,000 type of audio, there's a app that controllers. They're ridiculous mini controllers based on around. But if you start thinking further, you can also use various as this device to coach your own effects low level or which is ridiculously hardcore, but if you really want it's a cool way to play around, kind of very.
Similarly, you can do a lot of stuff with digitally controlled analog synthesizers, so that your sound source is still all analog. It's still all analog processing, but instead of using analog control information, you can do it through a digital controller. It opens up a lot of worlds. A lot of the new analog synths being sold commercially today are digitally controlled analog synths, as opposed to, for example, the original Moog-type devices, which were all analog controlled analog synths.
And actually, I realize that I might be scaring people away, but if you're really interested in building your own controller type device, what have you don't actually know how to program Pick2, because Lord, I don't have. But you can buy chips already flashed with the whatever you need to in order to build a complete MIDI controller that takes a lot, translates it over into something. Another sort of sister site app, drum.info, I believe, which is a site dedicated to building sort of headbox that finds eDrum applications, and all that they do is take, what happens in between when you hit a drum and get the pitch. Some little box or cute little potentiometer so that you can just and it's also built around how to build your own trigger path, where you build symbols out of Tupperware fairly regularly. And I'm not a professional, so I don't know exactly how useful all of it is from a practical standpoint.
As a percussionist, I can say that it is very useful. I haven't used the site that you particularly mentioned, but this eDrum for Free site covers a lot of the same trigger to MIDI converters as well.
The other thing that you can do is